Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something a bit different. Picture this. You're walking along a winding path through a dense forest. The trees are towering above you, and the ground beneath your feet feels soft, almost like the earth itself is cushioning your steps. There's a gentle breeze brushing past your skin, whispering secrets only the wind knows. In the distance, you can just make out the faintest glimpse of a mountain peak. You can't see the end of the path, but the journey itself feels strangely comforting. Now, you probably want to survive this walk without being at peace with the fact that you're not going to get to the top in a hurry. There's no finish line waiting at the summit. It's just you, the path, and the trees. But hey, isn't that what life is all about? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, drop your location and what time it is where you are. Let us see how far we're stretching into the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight, we're stepping into the heart of an ancient philosophy, one that has helped millions of people over centuries find peace in the chaos of life. We're talking about Buddhism, and specifically, the concept that life isn't a race with a finish line, but rather a journey that unfolds in its own time. In fact, according to Buddhist teachings, the entire point is not to reach some perfect state of existence, but to be fully aware of each step you take along the way. Now, imagine that for a second. What if you didn't need to chase the perfect job, the right relationship, or the ideal version of yourself? What if life wasn't about completing some checklist of milestones? It sounds strange, doesn't it? We've all been conditioned to think in terms of goals, achievements, and destinations. But Buddhist philosophy invites us to take a step back and rethink that approach. It teaches us that true peace comes from accepting that the journey itself is enough. In fact, it's the only thing that is guaranteed to be with us every single moment. Buddhism, as a belief system, was born in India around 2,500 years ago when Siddhartha Gautama, later known as the Buddha, began a journey to understand the nature of life, suffering, and how to end it. His journey is symbolic of the message that Buddhism imparts. It is not about where you end up, but how you experience each moment on the way there. The concept of life as a journey, not a destination, sits at the very core of Buddhist philosophy. But this is not just a vague idea of don't worry, be happy. It's a practical way to approach life that focuses on mindfulness, balance, and letting go of attachments to outcomes. The idea is that we spend so much of our time focused on the future that we miss what's right in front of us. And what's right in front of us? Our lives, everything we are, everything we feel, everything we experience. Imagine you're walking through that forest, but instead of rushing to get to the peak, your content is simply wander. Every tree, every leaf, every gust of wind carries meaning. You're fully present in every step. There's no anxiety about what's next or how much further. You're living the moment. Sounds a little too good to be true, doesn't it? But this is the essence of Buddhist teaching. The Buddhist journey wasn't about finding some distant end, but about understanding the nature of human existence, which he identified as suffering, or dukkha in Pali. But here's the kicker. Buddhism doesn't just say, suffering exists, deal with it. No, it gives a very clear, actionable way out of this suffering. According to the Buddha, we suffer because we cling to things, whether that's the idea of happiness, love, or material possessions. The more we grasp, the more we struggle. But the path to peace is through non-attachment, learning to experience life fully without grasping for any specific outcome. So, the journey itself, in its full, unmediated form, becomes the practice. What does that mean for you and me in the rush of our daily lives? Well, it means that life's not a checklist you need to finish, the number of followers you have, the job title, the accomplishments. Those are just markers along the path, not the point. The path itself is the point. The moments when you stop to appreciate the small things, the way the sun feels on your face, the sound of rain against the window, a conversation with a friend. Those moments are the essence of the journey. And when you can live with that awareness, life becomes richer, more meaningful. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting we all give up our ambitions or live without goals. Goals are fine. In fact, Buddhism encourages setting intentions. But it's the attachment to the outcomes, the obsessive drive to reach the destination, that Buddhism warns against. When we become fixated on where we're going, we miss the beauty and the lessons of where we are. The Eightfold Path is one of the most fundamental teachings of Buddhism that can guide us on this journey. It's a roadmap for living a life of balance, wisdom, and compassion. It's not a destination, but rather a way of being. The Eightfold Path includes things like right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. If you think about it, these principles are all about living fully in the present, living with awareness, kindness, and understanding. But even more than that, the Eightfold Path teaches us how to be fully engaged in the world while remaining detached from its outcomes. For example, think about right speech. It doesn't just mean not lying, but also means speaking with compassion, awareness, and truth. It's not about winning arguments, but connecting authentically with others. The Buddha's teachings invite us to show up for life, but without getting lost in it. And here is a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether the Buddha actually reached total enlightenment through sheer meditation, or whether his journey was one of gradual awakening. As he interacted with others, some say it was in solitude under the Bodhi tree, but others believe that real enlightenment happened through engagement with life itself, the good, the bad, and everything in between. This tension between individual isolation and social engagement is something we all feel from time to time. The Buddhist story isn't about rejecting society, but learning how to move through it without getting attached to it. This is the journey, learning to be present, learning to let go, and finding wisdom along the way. So, as we continue our walk down this philosophical path tonight, remember, life is more than a destination. It's a series of moments, all interconnected, all valuable. The key is being present in each one, knowing that the path you're on is the one that matters most. You might be wondering, what does this idea of life as a journey really mean? How does it translate into daily life? Well, let us take a deeper look at one of the core concepts in Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths. These aren't just some abstract ideas. They're practical principles that explain the nature of life and suffering and how we can find our way out of it. So let's break it down. The Buddha's journey, as we discussed, began with a deep dive into human suffering. It's something we all know too well, right? Stress, pain, disappointment, these are just the tip of the iceberg. The Buddha didn't just say, life is hard, and leave it at that. He observed, and then he articulated the very structure of suffering, which is why Buddhism remains so relevant today. The Four Noble Truths are about understanding suffering, why it exists, and, most importantly, how we can transcend it. The first truth, dukkha, is the acknowledgement that suffering is inherent in life. This doesn't mean that every moment is miserable. It simply means that life is full of impermanence, change, and unpredictability. No matter how much we try to control things, suffering, whether through physical pain, emotional loss, or dissatisfaction, will always exist. You might think, well, that's a bit of a downer. But stick with me here, because the next step is what makes the difference. The second truth is about the cause of suffering, tanha, which translates roughly to desire or craving. Here's the kicker. Suffering doesn't come from the world itself, but from our attachment to the world. We desire things to be different than they are, whether it's the pursuit of wealth, the craving for perfect relationships, or the endless desire for success. These desires drive us, and while they can be motivating, they can also blind us to the present moment. The more we grasp for something, the more we create our own suffering. Historians still argue whether desire itself is inherently bad, or whether it's the attachment to desire that causes suffering. Some scholars believe that certain desires, like the desire for self-improvement, aren't inherently harmful. Others argue that any attachment, whether to something good or bad, leads to suffering in the end. Regardless of the interpretation, the Buddhist take is clear. When we let go of our cravings and attachments, we reduce our suffering. Now, this leads us to the third noble truth, which is the cessation of suffering. Nirvana, which literally means the cessation, tells us that if we can eliminate the cause of suffering, our attachments, we can find peace. But it's not just about eliminating things from our lives or denying desires outright. It's about realizing that nothing in life is permanent or completely within our control. The secret to transcending suffering isn't in forcing things to go our way, but in accepting them as they are. It's the idea of letting go, not because we're giving up, but because we're freeing ourselves from unnecessary struggles. And finally, the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, which is the map to end suffering. The Eightfold Path isn't a rigid checklist of do this, do that. Instead, it's a guide to living mindfully, making wise decisions, and developing a compassionate heart. We'll dive deeper into the Eightfold Path in a later section, but for now, think of it as a practical toolkit, something to help you navigate the challenges of daily life while staying grounded in your own inner peace. So, how does all of this fit with our idea of life as a journey? Well, life is always going to present obstacles. We can't avoid pain, disappointment, or setbacks. But when we understand the nature of suffering and, more importantly, its cause, we can start to shift our focus. The journey itself becomes about how we relate to our experiences, not about trying to avoid them. When we accept that suffering is a part of life, and when we see that our attachments to outcomes are the real cause of that suffering, we start to live in a way that's free of unnecessary struggles. Think about it this way. When you're hiking through the dense forest, it's not the trees that cause you trouble. It's your obsession with getting to the top. If you could accept that the summit doesn't matter, that the path itself is what you're meant to experience, you would start to enjoy the journey for what it is. No more rushing, no more stress. Just a peaceful walk through the woods. Buddhism suggests that this approach is how we should live our lives mindfully, with awareness, and with an understanding that the world will always be full of ups and downs. The trick is in how we choose to respond to them. Will we cling to them, or will we let them go, allowing ourselves to move forward with grace? The Four Noble Truths aren't just abstract ideas to ponder. They're meant to be lived, practiced, and applied to our everyday experiences. They help us navigate the complexities of life, teaching us that suffering is inevitable. But that doesn't mean we have to be overwhelmed by it. Instead, we can move through it, just as we walk through the forest, step by step, letting go of the need to control the outcome. We learn to embrace the path, because it's the path itself that leads us to freedom. Now that we've dipped into the Four Noble Truths, let's move on to something that ties all of this together, the Eightfold Path. If the Four Noble Truths are the blueprint for understanding life's suffering, the Eightfold Path is the practical guide to walking through life in a way that minimizes its suffering. This path is essentially a toolkit for living a balanced, harmonious life. The beauty of the Eightfold Path lies in its simplicity. Each step builds on the others, creating a holistic approach to living with awareness, compassion, and wisdom. Think of the Eightfold Path as your personal guidebook for navigating the twists and turns of life. It's not about reaching a finish line, but about how you walk the path itself. And remember, just like with any journey, you won't get everything perfect all at once. The point isn't perfection, it's progress, and living in harmony with yourself and the world around you. So let's break down each of these 8 steps and see how they fit into the broader theme of life as a journey. The first step is right view. This means understanding the world as it truly is, not through a lens of fantasy or wishful thinking. It's about seeing things clearly and recognizing the impermanence of everything around us. In other words, you can't keep pretending that things won't change, because they will. This awareness of the constant ebb and flow of life helps you let go of your attachment to outcomes and opens the door to acceptance. You start to see that life is a series of experiences, each one offering a lesson. The second step Right intention is about setting clear, positive intentions for your actions. It's not enough just to act. Your motivations behind those actions are what matter. Right intention means acting with kindness, compassion, and generosity, rather than selfishness or harmful desires. It's about aligning your thoughts and actions with your values. This step helps you stay true to the path, ensuring that your journey isn't sidetracked by negative impulses or unhealthy cravings. Next is right speech. This one's pretty straightforward. Speak truthfully, kindly, and constructively. Avoid gossip, lies, and harsh words. It's about using your words to uplift, not tear down. Now, here's the tricky part. Right speech doesn't just mean avoiding the bad stuff. It also means speaking with intention, speaking when necessary, and sometimes speaking less. We live in an age where we're constantly bombarded with words, opinions, and noise. But Buddhism reminds us that words can create worlds, so make sure you read creating a world of peace and respect with your speech. The fourth step is right action, and this one's about how you live and interact with others. It's about behaving ethically, living with honesty, compassion, and respect for others. Right action isn't just about what you do in front of others. It's about what you do when no one is watching. It's about not just avoiding harmful actions like stealing or cheating, but also promoting good actions like helping others and making a positive impact on the world. When you act from a place of mindfulness, you'll start to notice the ripple effect your actions can have on those around you. Then we come to right livelihood. This step asks the question, how do you make a living? Is your job aligned with your values, or does it contribute to harm in some way? Right livelihood means engaging in work that is ethical, that does no harm to others, and ideally, that benefits the world in some way. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to quit your job and become a monk. It simply means being mindful of how your work affects others, and ensuring that your livelihood doesn't perpetuate suffering. If you're in a job that doesn't align with your values, this is the step that encourages you to reassess and make changes if needed. The sixth step is right effort, and this one's about cultivating positive habits and intentions. It's about putting in the effort to do good, to grow, and to improve your life. But don't get caught up in the idea of constant striving or doing more. Right effort is about finding balance. It is about putting in the right amount of energy toward positive growth and avoiding the burnout that comes from trying to do too much. It is a reminder that life isn't about overworking yourself or pushing too hard. It is about making consistent, mindful efforts toward a better you. Right mindfulness is the seventh step, and it's all about being present. It's about paying attention to the here and now, and observing your thoughts, feelings, and actions without judgment. Mindfulness is a core Buddhist practice, and for good reason. The more aware you are of your present experience, the more you can navigate life's challenges with grace and clarity. Mindfulness is like the compass that keeps you on track, ensuring that you're living in alignment with your values and purpose. It's a practice that can transform every aspect of your life, from your relationships to your work, to your sense of inner peace. Finally, right concentration is about developing mental clarity and focus. This is often where meditation comes in, creating a mental environment where you can focus your energy and thoughts in a productive way. Right concentration helps you stay on course, no matter how many distractions life throws at you. It's not just about being able to meditate for hours, though that's a nice bonus. It's about training your mind to focus, stay calm, and maintain balance in all situations. The Eightfold Path, as a whole, isn't about achieving a particular end goal. It is about living in a way that allows you to experience life fully, without clinging to the past or obsessing over the future. It's about creating a life that flows naturally, like a river that winds its way through the landscape, constantly moving, constantly adjusting, yet always moving forward. Each step on the path invites you to reflect, to grow, and to let go of the attachments that keep you from living fully. Buddhism doesn't promise an easy, problem-free life. In fact, it acknowledges that life will always have its ups and downs. But by walking the Eightfold Path, we learn to move through those challenges with clarity, kindness, and wisdom. And remember, It's not about getting to some perfect destination, it's about enjoying the walk, step by mindful step. Now that we've covered the Eightfold Path, let us dive into another essential concept that shapes how Buddhists view the journey of life: karma. In everyday language, we often hear people use karma as a catch-all explanation for good or bad things that happen. What goes around comes around, right? But in Buddhism, karma goes deeper than that, and understanding it fully can give us more clarity on how our actions affect both our present and our future. Karma, in its simplest form, refers to the law of cause and effect. It's the idea that every action you take, whether physical, verbal, or mental, creates an effect in the world. This might sound like a spiritual version of Newton's third law: for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. But in the case of karma, it has not just the immediate effect we see that matters, it has the long-term ripple effects of those actions as well. So, when we think about karma, we're not just talking about whether you're a good or bad person. It's about the subtle effects of your actions, thoughts, and words over time. Each action leaves an imprint on your life, and these imprints determine how you will experience the world in the future. If you help someone, the positive energy you put out will eventually come back to you in one way or another. On the flip side, if you harm others, the negative energy you generate may find its way back to you as well. Now, I know you might be thinking, does this mean every little thing I do has some cosmic consequence? Well, not necessarily. Karma is not a simplistic, one-to-one system of punishment and reward. The Buddhist teachings tell us that karma is also influenced by the intention behind the action. It's not just what you do, it's why you do it. Take this example. If you donate money to charity because you want recognition, the karma created by that action isn't as positive as it would be if you donated selflessly, out of compassion. The outcome is the same: the charity receives the money, but the intention changes the energy behind it. Buddhism teaches that to truly cultivate good karma, it's essential that your intentions align with your higher values, like compassion, kindness, and understanding. Historians still debate whether karma should be viewed purely in terms of personal accountability, or whether it is also linked to collective karma, which refers to the shared responsibility of groups, communities, or even entire nations. For example, in a larger context, some argue that society's actions, wars, injustices, environmental harm can be seen as collective karma. So, while individual actions certainly play a role, the cumulative effects of collective behavior can also create long-lasting repercussions. It's a complex issue that Buddhist scholars continue to discuss, but one thing is clear: karma isn't just about what you do, it's about how you do it and the deeper intention behind it. But karma is not just some abstract force waiting to zap you when you do something wrong, or to reward you when you're kind. It's actually a teaching about personal empowerment. Understanding karma means understanding that you are the architect of your own future. Every action you take, no matter how small, is shaping your destiny. It's easy to feel like life is happening to you, like you're at the mercy of circumstances. But karma tells us that you hold the power to shape your future with your actions, both big and small. In this way, karma invites us to reflect on the choices we make every day, not just the big ones. Did you snap at someone in a moment of frustration? That has karmic implications, not only for the person on the receiving end, but for yourself as well. Did you take a moment to lend a hand, to listen with compassion, or to speak a kind word? That, too, leaves an imprint on your future. And over time, these small actions build up to shape your experience of the world. Let us put this into context by relating it back to the idea of life as a journey. Imagine walking down that forest path, step by step. Every step you take can be compared to an action. The ground you walk on, smooth, rocky, or uneven, reflects the effects of your actions based on how they are rooted in intention. Some actions will lead you down a smooth, pleasant part of the path, while others may bring you into a challenging section filled with obstacles. But the beauty of the journey is that you have the ability to shape the terrain you walk on. With every conscious step, as you walk with mindfulness, Each action can help smooth the path, or help you navigate the obstacles with greater ease. Buddhism encourages us to move forward in life with awareness of our actions and the impact they have, not just on ourselves, but on others. By understanding karma, we become more responsible stewards of our thoughts, words, and actions. It is not about achieving perfection, nobody is perfect, but about taking responsibility for our actions and making an effort to align them with kindness, compassion, and wisdom. One of the most profound aspects of karma is that it works both ways. While your actions impact your future, they also influence those around you. If you're constantly kind, compassionate, and thoughtful, you create positive energy that has a ripple effect, touching the lives of those around you. And as you walk this path with more awareness, your journey through life becomes smoother, less chaotic, and more fulfilling. In essence, karma is about making conscious choices. It is about living your life in a way that not only benefits you but helps create a world that is kinder, more compassionate, and more aware. When you understand that your actions matter and that they raise shaping your journey one small step at a time, you become more attuned to the path you ray on. So, the next time you're walking through life, remember, each thought, each word, each action has the potential to shape the path ahead. You don't need to race to the destination, because every step is its own journey. Now that we've had a deep dive into karma, let's shift gears a bit and look at another core concept of Buddhist philosophy: impermanence. This might sound like a simple idea, but once you really sit with it, it has the potential to transform how you see life. Impermanence is the teaching that everything in life is constantly changing. Nothing lasts forever, and everything you experience, whether it's a joyful moment, a painful one, or even the material things you cling to as temporary, sounds a little bleak, right? But here's the interesting twist. Impermanence, far from being a source of despair, is actually one of the most liberating concepts in Buddhism. When you realize that everything is in flux, you begin to understand that no moment is ever permanent, and neither are your problems, worries, or challenges. This gives you the space to let go of the attachment to any particular outcome or experience. You don't need to cling to that perfect day at the beach or feel devastated when things go wrong. Life ebbs and flows, and so do your emotions, thoughts, and experiences. Impermanence is not just a philosophical concept. It's something you can observe in your day-to-day life. Take a moment to reflect on the small, yet profound ways this principle shows up in the world. For example, think about a leaf falling from a tree when it first buds. It's green and vibrant, but over time, it changes and eventually, it falls and decays. But here's the kicker. The leaf's transformation is not a failure. It's simply a part of the larger cycle of life. It serves as a reminder that everything has its season and nothing is meant to last forever. Historians still argue whether Buddhism's focus on impermanence was a direct reaction to Hinduism's belief in the eternal soul, or if it emerged as a natural response to the realities of life. Some scholars believe that the Buddha's insight into impermanence was a revolutionary departure from earlier religious beliefs, which focused on the eternal, unchanging soul. Others see it as a natural extension of human wisdom, the recognition that everything is subject to change, even the most seemingly permanent aspects of existence. But whether it was revolutionary or not, the idea of impermanence can radically shift how we approach the world. When you understand that nothing lasts forever, you stop trying to control things that are outside your control. You stop clinging to the idea that everything should stay the same. And this leads to a level of freedom that is hard to achieve. When we constantly fighting against the natural flow of life, take a minute and think about your own life. What are the things you hold on to tightly and desperately because you think they will make you happy or give your life meaning? It could be a job, a relationship, a physical object, or even a certain image of yourself. Now, consider this. If you could truly accept that nothing in life is permanent, not the highs, the lows, the successes, or the failures, how might you feel? Could you release some of the pressure and allow life to unfold naturally? This is where impermanence becomes a powerful practice. It's not just about accepting that things will change. It's about embracing it with peace, knowing that change is the only constant. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's easy to talk about accepting impermanence when life is going smoothly. It's when things are tough that impermanence can be a real game changer. When we're in the middle of a difficult time, whether it's heartbreak, loss, or even just a tough day at work, the principle of impermanence can offer us much needed perspective, reminding ourselves that nothing lasts forever gives us a sense of relief. This pain, this struggle, this frustration, none of it is permanent. It will pass. Just like everything else. This doesn't mean that we should avoid feeling emotions or experiences. Buddhism doesn't advocate repressing feelings, but rather acknowledging them and recognizing that they are part of the flow of life. By practicing mindfulness and understanding impermanence, we can observe our emotions without becoming attached to them. We don't need to cling to the idea that we are our emotions. They come and go, like waves in the ocean. Impermanence also teaches us to appreciate the present moment because we know it won't last forever. The joy you feel when you're with loved ones, the sense of peace you find in a quiet moment, the exhilaration of accomplishing a goal, all of these are fleeting. But that doesn't make them any less valuable. In fact, it makes them more precious. When you realize that the good times are also impermanent, you savor them more deeply. Similarly, when you're facing a difficult time, you can find comfort in the knowledge that the storm will eventually pass. Now, consider this as you continue on your journey through life. You're constantly moving, evolving, and changing. Your body, your mind, your relationships, your environment all are in a constant state of flux, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's liberating. Instead of fighting change, you start to see it as a natural part of the human experience. Life is a river, constantly flowing, and you're simply a traveler along for the ride. You can't control the current, but you can choose how to navigate it. This understanding of impermanence doesn't just apply to the big, obvious things in life, it applies to everything. The mundane things you might take for granted, like the taste of your morning coffee or the sound of the birds outside, are all fleeting. But it's in this fleeting nature that they become valuable. The Buddhist practice of mindfulness invites you to experience each of these moments fully, appreciating them as they are, without trying to hold on to them. When you can do this, life becomes richer and more meaningful, because you're no longer waiting for the next big thing. You're living right here, right now, in the midst of it all. To bring it all together, impermanence teaches us that nothing in life is fixed or certain. The joy, the sorrow, the success, the failure, all of it is part of the ever-changing journey. And when you accept that, you start to let go of the need for control. You learn to ride the waves, not fight them. This, in essence, is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. Life isn't about reaching a fixed destination. It's about embracing each moment as it comes, with acceptance, awareness, and peace. Now that we've explored the concept of impermanence, let us talk about another core teaching in Buddhism that helps guide us on our journey through life: the middle way. This might sound a bit like a political slogan or something you'd find on a yoga poster, but the middle way is actually a deeply profound and practical teaching in Buddhist philosophy, and it's one that many people overlook. The middle way is all about balance. It's the idea of avoiding extremes, whether in your actions, your thoughts, or your behavior. Buddhists believe that many of our problems arise from our tendency to swing too far in one direction or the other. We either indulge too much, seeking pleasure and comfort at all costs, or we deny ourselves, seeking suffering or asceticism in an attempt to purify ourselves. The middle way suggests that true peace and happiness lie in moderation, not in excess or deprivation. It teaches us how to find harmony between the poles of excess and deprivation in every aspect of our lives. But here is the twist. Living the middle way doesn't mean living a life of boredom or mediocrity. It doesn't mean being constantly lukewarm or avoiding any intensity. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The middle way encourages us to engage deeply with life, but without getting caught up in the extremes. It's about living with purpose, awareness, and mindfulness, and finding fulfillment in each moment. Let's start by looking at how the Buddha himself came to discover the middle way. As a young prince, Siddhartha Gautama, who would later become the Buddha, was shielded from the harsh realities of life. He lived a life of luxury, surrounded by pleasure and comfort, never knowing hunger, pain, or suffering. But one day, he left the palace and encountered the realities of human existence, sickness, aging, and death. He was struck by the suffering he saw in the world, and it sent him on a quest to find the cause of suffering and how to end it. For years, Siddhartha engaged in extreme ascetic practices, denying himself food and comfort in the hope of attaining enlightenment through suffering. He believed that by pushing his body to its limits, he could transcend the suffering of the world. But after a long period of self-inflicted hardship, Siddhartha realized something important. Denying his basic human needs wasn't bringing him closer to enlightenment. It was only making him weak and distracted. So, Siddhartha abandoned the path of extreme asceticism and instead sought a more balanced approach. This is when he discovered the middle way. He began to eat enough to nourish his body and mind, meditated with full awareness, and refrained from extreme indulgence. This balanced approach led to his enlightenment, and thus the middle way became a central tenet of Buddhism. Now, how does this concept apply to us in modern life? Well, many of us live in a world that often feels like it is pulling us into directions. On one hand, we're constantly bombarded with messages encouraging us to indulge by this, eat that, do more, experience everything. On the other hand, we have the opposite message: to resist everything, to be constantly productive, to avoid pleasure in the pursuit of perfection. Whether it's the latest fad diet, the pressure to perform at work, or the relentless pursuit of personal development, it's easy to feel caught between extremes. Buddhism offers a refreshing counterpoint to this cycle of extremes. The middle way teaches us that neither indulgence nor self-denial will bring lasting happiness. Instead, we need to find balance. It's not about avoiding pleasure entirely, but experiencing it mindfully. It's not about constantly denying yourself, but about being conscious of the impact your actions have on your body, mind, and spirit. By finding the middle way in our lives, we can reduce stress, find inner peace, and make better decisions. Let's consider a few examples of how this works in practice. Take food, for instance. We live in a world where food is everywhere, and many of us are either constantly indulging in it or, conversely, depriving ourselves through diets and fasting. The middle way doesn't advocate for extreme measures like binge eating or starvation. Instead, it encourages mindful eating. This means eating with awareness, savoring the food, and paying attention to what nourishes your body, rather than eating out of habit or emotional need. The same principle applies to relationships. We've all been in situations where we either give too much, overextending ourselves and losing our sense of identity, or we pull back too much, creating distance and isolation. The middle way teaches us to find a balance in how we connect with others. It's about being open, compassionate, and loving, but without losing ourselves in the process. It's about being present with others, but also taking care of your own needs. The middle way also applies to our relationship with work and ambition. In a world that prizes constant productivity, it's easy to fall into the trap of working nonstop, constantly striving for more. But the middle way teaches us the true fulfillment doesn't come from exhausting ourselves in the pursuit of success. Instead, it's about finding a balanced approach, working with intention, but also taking time to rest, recharge, and enjoy life. Buddhism offers us a path that's free of the extreme views of either indulgence or deprivation. Instead of chasing after fleeting pleasures or trying to control every part of our existence, the middle way invites us to live mindfully, aware of both the big picture and the small, moment-to-moment joys. It's a path of moderation and mindfulness that leads to a more peaceful, fulfilling life. Now, it is important to note that the middle way doesn't mean living without passion or avoiding all intensity. In fact, It's about engaging fully with life, but without letting the extremes of desire or aversion govern your actions. Passion and intensity are part of the human experience, but they must be tempered with mindfulness and awareness. In the end, the middle way is a reminder that life is not about finding the perfect balance or avoiding extremes at all costs. It's about learning how to live fully, without being swept away by the tides of desire or fear. It's about living with purpose, mindfulness, and a sense of balance that keeps you grounded, no matter what life throws your way. Now that we've explored the middle way and its role in helping us find balance, let's turn to another cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy, mindfulness. This teaching, which has become somewhat of a buzzword in modern culture, is actually one of the most profound practices for cultivating a peaceful and balanced life. But what does mindfulness really mean, and how can we use it to transform our journey? At its core, mindfulness is the practice of being fully present in the moment. It's about bringing your attention to what's happening right now, without judgment, without distraction, and without attachment. It's easy to say, be present, but when you really dig into what that means, you realize how much we typically miss by living on autopilot. We're always rushing through the day, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, or multitasking, but rarely do we stop and truly experience the moment we're in. Buddhism teaches that mindfulness is a powerful tool for calming the mind, improving concentration, and gaining insight into the true nature of reality. By becoming more aware of the present moment, we can begin to see things as they really are, without the lens of our habitual thoughts, judgments, and distractions clouding our perception. Mindfulness helps us step out of the mental noise and into the simplicity of the present moment, where we can experience life with more clarity and peace. Take a moment to think about your typical day. How often do you find yourself completely immersed in the task at hand? Probably not too often, right? We tend to get caught up in our thoughts, our plans, our to-do lists, and all the things that demand our attention. But mindfulness asks us to step back and observe those thoughts, rather than being carried away by them. It's about creating space between you and your thoughts, so you can choose how to respond, rather than reacting automatically. The Buddha himself taught mindfulness as part of the path to enlightenment. His teachings emphasize the importance of mindful awareness in every aspect of life, from the simplest actions like eating and walking to more profound practices like meditation. The Buddha didn't just advocate for mindfulness in moments of stillness. He encouraged us to bring mindfulness into our daily lives, to observe every action, every thought, and every sensation with a sense of presence and awareness. But let's take this back to the idea of life as a journey. Imagine walking through the forest again, but this time, you're doing it with full attention. Each step is deliberate. You notice the feel of the ground beneath your feet, the sound of the leaves rustling in the wind, the scent of the air. You're not rushing to get to the end of the path. You're simply present, taking in each moment for what it is. That's what mindfulness does for your life. It brings you into the present, so you can experience it fully, without distraction or regret. Now, mindfulness isn't always easy. It requires practice and patience. In fact, the Buddha often spoke about the importance of training the mind, and mindfulness is one of the key tools for doing that. In our busy, fast-paced world, it is easy to fall into the trap of thinking we need to be doing something all the time, whether it is working, socializing, or achieving something. But Buddhism teaches us that true peace doesn't come from doing more. It comes from simply being, fully, in the present moment. In modern times, mindfulness has become a popular practice in the context of mental health, stress reduction, and personal development. It has been shown to help with everything from reducing anxiety and depression to improving focus and emotional regulation. But mindfulness isn't just about mental health. It is about developing a deeper awareness of your life and how you experience it. It's about learning to observe your thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations without being caught up in them. When you do this, you start to break free from the cycles of overthinking, anxiety, and reactivity that often control our lives. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Mindfulness also helps us deal with suffering in a more profound way. When we experience pain, whether it is physical or emotional, it is easy to get caught in the story of that pain. We ruminate on it, we judge it, we try to push it away. But mindfulness teaches us to simply observe the pain without judgment. It's about being present with the discomfort, acknowledging it, and letting it pass naturally. This is an incredibly powerful way to deal with life's inevitable challenges, because instead of resisting or avoiding them, we learn to embrace them as part of the journey. In Buddhism, mindfulness is also closely linked with the practice of meditation. Meditation helps us cultivate mindfulness by providing a structured way to train the mind. When you meditate, you sit quietly and focus on your breath, observing your thoughts as they come and go. The goal isn't to stop your thoughts or clear your mind completely, but to observe them without getting attached to them. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes to apply mindfulness in your daily life. Whether you're talking to someone, walking down the street, or even just sitting in silence. Now, let's talk about the quirky side of mindfulness because, trust me, it's not all Zen moments and peaceful sitting. One of the most fascinating things about mindfulness is that it is not just about being present. With the good stuff, it is also about embracing the messy, chaotic, and uncomfortable parts of life. Buddhists teach us to be mindful of everything, not just the pleasant moments, and that includes things like boredom, discomfort, frustration, and pain. The trick is to approach all of these experiences with the same awareness and acceptance. When you can be mindful of the tough moments without trying to avoid them, they lose their power over you. Imagine sitting in a long meeting at work, your mind wandering and your patience wearing thin. Instead of mentally checking out or getting frustrated, mindfulness invites you to be present with that discomfort. You notice the tension in your body, the thoughts running through your mind, and the impatience building up. But instead of getting swept away by it, you simply observe it, and in doing so, you start to detach from the emotional reaction. It's not about making the discomfort go away, it's about being with it, fully present, without trying to change it. This is one of the most profound aspects of mindfulness. It helps us develop a more peaceful relationship with ourselves and our experiences. By learning to be present with whatever arises, whether it's joy, pain, boredom, or excitement, we cultivate a deeper understanding of our own mind. And through that understanding, we begin to see life not as a series of fleeting moments to be grasped at, but as a flowing river that we can simply observe and enjoy. So, as we continue on our journey, remember that mindfulness is not just a practice, it's a way of being. It's about being fully present, engaged, and aware in every moment without judgment or attachment. It's about finding peace in the simplicity of life, even when things are messy or uncertain. And in doing so, we embrace the journey, step by mindful step. Now that we've explored mindfulness, let's move to another essential concept in Buddhism: detachment. This is another idea that, at first glance, might seem a bit odd. How can letting go of attachments be a good thing? We live in a world that often glorifies ownership, clinging, and attachment. The more we acquire, the more we seem to think we'll be happy, right? But Buddhism teaches us a very different approach, one that says freedom lies in releasing our attachment to people, possessions, and even ideas. At the heart of Buddhist teaching is the recognition that attachment is one of the primary causes of suffering. We all experience attachment to things, whether it's our relationships, our jobs, or even the idea of who we are. We cling to these things because we think they give us stability, identity, or happiness. But the truth is, the more tightly we hold on, the more we set ourselves up for suffering. This is because, as we discussed earlier, everything is impermanent. People change, things break, situations shift. When we hold on to these things as if they're permanent, we set ourselves up for disappointment when they inevitably change or disappear. Buddhism doesn't ask us to give up everything or retreat from the world. Instead, it invites us to develop a healthy relationship with attachment. It asks us to recognize the impermanent nature of everything in our lives and to approach those things with a sense of openness and ease, rather than grasping. Detachment, in the Buddhist sense, isn't about shutting off or rejecting the world. It's about engaging with it, without becoming overly attached or consumed by it. Think of it like holding a flower in your hand. If you grip it too tightly, the petals will break. But if you hold it gently, you can appreciate its beauty without crushing it. Detachment is about holding life with the same gentleness, being involved, but not clinging. It's the art of loving without possessing, enjoying without depending, and living fully without the fear of losing what you hold dear. So, let's break it down. Detachment doesn't mean you shouldn't love people, cherish your possessions, or enjoy life's pleasures. In fact, the opposite is true. When we practice detachment, we can engage more fully in relationships, enjoy experiences more deeply, and appreciate life as it comes, without the constant fear of losing it. We're not stuck in the future, worried about what might go wrong, or in the past, regretting what we've lost. We're living in the present moment with the awareness that things will change, and that's okay. But here's where it gets a little tricky. It's one thing to say, don't be attached to things, and another thing entirely to practice it. We all know how hard it is to let go of things we love, right? Whether it's a favorite item, a relationship, or a dream we've been chasing. It feels incredibly difficult to detach. We get so caught up in the idea of this is mine, this is me, or this is how I define myself. But Buddhism teaches us that attachment doesn't just cause emotional pain. It can also cloud our judgment and prevent us from seeing things clearly. The more we hold on to something, the more it can define us. And the harder it becomes to find peace when that thing inevitably changes or disappears. Now, one of the most common attachments we have is to our own sense of self. We all have a mental image of who we are, our identity, our role in the world, how we present ourselves to others. But Buddhism teaches that the concept of a permanent self is an illusion. This is a central teaching of Buddhism, and it's one that often takes time to fully grasp. The self we think we are, our ego, our identity, isn't as solid as we imagine. It's fluid, constantly changing, and shaped by countless factors. And the more we cling to this idea of a fixed self, the more we suffer when we inevitably encounter situations that challenge our identity. Historians and Buddhist scholars still debate the full extent of the Buddha's teaching on the self. Some argue that it's a deep metaphysical teaching, one that suggests the self is an illusion of the mind. Others interpret it as a more psychological concept, suggesting that attachment to the self creates suffering by limiting our perception of the world and others. But regardless of interpretation, the practical message is clear. When we cling to a fixed sense of self, we limit our ability to experience life as it truly is. So, how do we practice detachment in our own lives? It starts with awareness. The next time you feel yourself gripping tightly to something, whether it's a thought, an object, or even a relationship, pause and observe the feeling. Are you holding on because you truly enjoy it, or because you fear losing it? Recognizing your attachment is the first step toward letting go. Detachment is not about forcing yourself to stop caring. It is about recognizing the impermanence of everything and learning to engage with life from a place of openness and ease. Detachment also invites us to let go of expectations. How often do we get attached to the idea of how things should be? We plan, we dream, and we expect outcomes. But life rarely goes as planned. And when we are attached to a certain outcome, we're often setting ourselves up for disappointment. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean giving up on goals. It simply means releasing the need for things to unfold exactly as we envision. It's about accepting life's natural rhythm, with all of its ups and downs, without feeling the need to control it. The beauty of detachment is that it actually opens us up to life in a richer, fuller way. When we stop clinging to the idea of how things should be, we can appreciate them for what they are: imperfect, fleeting, and beautiful. We can love people without trying to control them, enjoy experiences without attaching our happiness to them, and live fully without the constant fear of loss. Ultimately, detachment isn't about withdrawal. It's about freedom. It has the freedom to experience life without fear of losing what we've attached ourselves to. It's the freedom to be fully present, knowing that everything both good and bad is temporary. And in that freedom, we find peace. We stop holding on so tightly to everything that we miss the beauty of the moment itself. We start to see the flow of life as it is, and we move with it rather than against it. Now that we've touched on detachment, let us shift our focus to another central teaching in Buddhism that can deeply shape our perspective on life, the nature of the self. If you've been following along, you might have noticed that this idea overlaps with some of the other concepts we've discussed, like impermanence and detachment. Buddhism teaches us that the self, this idea of a solid, permanent I, is actually an illusion. At first, this can be a tough pill to swallow. After all, we all have a strong sense of who we are, right? But Buddhism invites us to explore the notion that this self we hold so tightly to is not as fixed as we imagine. Buddhism posits that our idea of self is constructed, a product of our thoughts, beliefs, and experiences. We're not born with an inherent, permanent self. Instead, we develop this sense of identity over time, shaped by our environment, culture, relationships, and even our own internal thoughts. The problem is that we become so attached to this self, our name, our roles, our personal stories, that we forget it's something constantly in flux, rather than a solid, unchanging thing. But here's the key. Once we realize that the self is fluid, constantly changing, and ultimately impermanent, we start to loosen our grip on it. This can be incredibly freeing. Think about it. How often do we get caught up in labels, judgments, and expectations of who we should be? We define ourselves by our careers, our relationships, our achievements, or even our failures. But when we understand that these labels are not the essence of who we are, we begin to detach from them, allowing ourselves to experience life more fully. Historians still debate whether the Buddhist teachings on the no-self or anatta represent a rejection of individuality or simply an invitation to look beyond ego-driven identity. Some argue that this teaching emphasizes the illusory nature of the self and its attachments, while others believe it is more about the fact that our sense of self is interdependent with others. But regardless of interpretation, the practical impact of the no-self teaching is clear. It invites us to let go of our fixed ideas of who we are and recognize that our sense of self is a dynamic, ever-changing experience. But how do we begin to experience this for ourselves? The practice starts with awareness. Every time we label ourselves, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I'm a success, we reinforce the illusion of a fixed self. These labels, while convenient, limit our potential. They trap us in a cycle of self-judgment, comparison, and attachment. But when we start to observe these labels without identifying with them, we create space between who we truly are and the roles we play. For instance, next time you find yourself frustrated, stop and notice, I'm feeling frustrated, rather than saying, I am frustrated. The difference is subtle, but it's powerful. By separating yourself from the emotion, you start to see that it's just one experience among many, not the essence of who you are. This small shift in perspective helps to loosen the hold of the self. This brings us to the practice of meditation. Meditation is a tool that allows us to observe the mind and the way it creates the illusion of self. Through meditation, we begin to witness the constant flow of thoughts and emotions, and we can start to see that these thoughts are not who we are. They come and go, like clouds passing through the sky, but the sky, the essence of who we are, remains unchanged. The more we meditate, the more we see that we are not defined by the thoughts that arise in our minds or the roles that we play in life. We are simply the awareness behind them. This doesn't mean that we lose our sense of identity altogether. Rather, it means we stop clinging to it as if it is the ultimate truth of who we are. We start to live with a sense of freedom, where our identities are fluid, where we can step into new roles without being attached to old ones. This also allows us to be more compassionate toward others, because we recognize that they, too, are not defined by their actions or their labels. We see them as dynamic beings, just as we see ourselves. The concept of no self can also transform how we relate to others. When we understand that the self is an illusion, we can begin to see that others aren't as separate from us as we often believe. We're all interconnected, all part of the same web of existence. Our actions, thoughts, and words have an impact on those around us. When we let go of our rigid sense of self, we open ourselves to greater empathy and understanding. We start to see others not as objects or roles to be judged, but as fellow travelers on the same journey. Detachment from the self also helps us break free from the cycle of comparison. We live in a world where everyone seems to be measuring themselves against others, whether it is in terms of success, appearance, relationships, or status. But when we understand the fluid nature of the self, we stop comparing ourselves to others. We recognize that everyone is on their own path, and that their journey doesn't invalidate our own. We're not in competition with anyone else. We're simply walking our own unique path. In practical terms, experiencing the nature of the self can be liberating. It helps us step out of the prison of self-judgment and self-criticism. We stop living for external validation and start living for internal peace and clarity. When we detach from our ego-driven identities, we no longer seek approval or avoid disapproval. We simply are. We can act from a place of authenticity, free from the need to impress, to conform, or to prove ourselves. To bring it all together, the teaching of no self in Buddhism isn't about denying our individuality. It is about recognizing that our sense of self is not as fixed as we think it is. It's about understanding that our identities are not permanent, but ever-changing, and that we don't need to cling to them for validation or security. Once we let go of this attachment, we find that life opens up in beautiful and unexpected ways. We become more connected to the world around us, more compassionate toward others, and more at peace with ourselves. So, as you continue on your journey, remember, you are not your labels, your roles, or your identities. You are the awareness that observes them all. And when you begin to experience life from this place of freedom, the journey itself becomes lighter, more open, and filled with endless possibilities. Now that we've discussed the nature of the self, let's turn our attention to another crucial aspect of Buddhist philosophy, samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. At the heart of samsara is the understanding that life is cyclical, not linear. Every one of us is part of this endless cycle of becoming constantly born, living, dying, and being reborn again, not just in physical form, but in our habits, thoughts, and actions. It's a fundamental aspect of the Buddhist worldview, and it offers us a profound way of looking at the ongoing nature of existence. Samsara is a word that you might have heard in various contexts, especially when talking about reincarnation. In Buddhism, samsara refers not only to the cycle of physical rebirth, but also to the continuous cycle of suffering and dissatisfaction that we experience in our everyday lives. The Buddha taught that our attachments, desires, and ignorance create this cycle, and the key to breaking free is understanding its nature and, ultimately, achieving liberation. When we think of samsara, we often imagine it as a never-ending cycle, a wheel that keeps turning without end. This cycle is driven by the three poisons of the mind: greed, hatred, and delusion. These mental states lead to actions that perpetuate suffering, creating more attachment, more desire, and more confusion. It's like being stuck in a loop, where the more we try to escape, the more entangled we become. But here is the hopeful part. The Buddha taught that this cycle is not something we are doomed to repeat forever. There is a way out. The key to breaking free from samsara is to understand the nature of suffering and how it arises. The Buddhist teachings point out that suffering isn't just physical pain or emotional distress. It is the very dissatisfaction we experience in life. This dissatisfaction comes from our attachment to things that are transient. We cling to people, objects, beliefs, and ideas, thinking they will provide us with lasting happiness. But when those things inevitably change or fade away, we experience frustration, sadness, and pain. In this way, Samsara is driven by our craving for things to stay the same, our desire for permanence in a world that is ever-changing. Now, you might be wondering, why do we keep coming back to this cycle? Well, according to Buddhism, samsara exists because we are trapped in ignorance. We fail to see the true nature of life. We are blind to the impermanence of everything, and we mistakenly believe that clinging to things will lead to lasting happiness. But this attachment is precisely what creates suffering. The Buddhist teachings give us a way to step outside the cycle, to break free from samsara. One of the most important insights of Buddhism is that suffering is not something to avoid or escape, but something to understand and embrace. When we can fully grasp the nature of suffering, that it arises from attachment, ignorance, and craving, we can begin to release our grip on things that are fleeting. We can stop trying to control the uncontrollable and start to let life unfold as it is. This is how we begin to break free from samsara. But here is an interesting tidbit. Historians still debate whether the Buddha's teachings on samsara were influenced by earlier concepts of reincarnation in Hinduism, or if he developed a completely new way of thinking about life and death. Some scholars argue that Buddha's teachings on samsara focus more on the psychological aspects of suffering, rather than a literal belief in reincarnation. Others suggest that the idea of samsara, as it appears in Buddhism, is closely tied to the concept of rebirth, where one's actions in this life influence the next life. Regardless of the academic debates, the most important takeaway is that samsara represents the cyclical nature of suffering, and understanding its dynamics can help us find liberation. Now, how do we apply this idea of samsara to our own lives? It's not just about the concept of past lives or future rebirths. It is about seeing how we are trapped in repetitive patterns of suffering in the here and now. Think about the cycles you experience in your own life. You might notice patterns. Perhaps you get caught in the same kind of relationships, or you keep falling into the same negative thought loops, or you find yourself constantly chasing after things that don't bring lasting happiness. These repetitive cycles are a manifestation of samsara in your present life. The good news: samsara is not something that has to control us forever. Buddhism offers us a path out of samsara through the practice of wisdom, ethics, and mental discipline, what we know as the Noble Eightfold Path. This path teaches us to see the world clearly, to act with compassion, and to cultivate a mind that is free from attachment. It's a way to break free from the cycle of craving, ignorance, and suffering, and to experience life in a way that is less about grasping and more about letting go. Now, you might wonder, if samsara is the cycle of suffering, then what is the opposite? What is the end goal of this Buddhist journey? Nirvana is the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice, and it's often described as the cessation of suffering. But here is the twist. Nirvana isn't a place or a final destination you reach after life. It's a state of being. It's the moment when you fully let go of attachment, desire, and ignorance. It is the end of the cycle of samsara because you no longer feed the cycle with your craving and clinging. In essence, nirvana is freedom, the freedom to experience life without the weight of suffering or the desire for permanence. But here is a thought-provoking point. Nirvana isn't something we achieve in a dramatic moment of enlightenment. It's a gradual process. It's the cultivation of awareness, mindfulness, and detachment in daily life. Each moment of mindfulness, each act of letting go, moves us closer to breaking free from samsara and moving toward nirvana. As we move through our journey, the key takeaway is that samsara is not something to fear. It's simply the way things are when we cling to the impermanent. But when we understand it, when we learn to let go and embrace the ebb and flow of life, we begin to move beyond it. And that's where true freedom and peace reside. As we explore the idea of samsara and the liberation from it, we must now turn to enlightenment, the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path. If you've been following along, you've probably gathered that enlightenment isn't a destination in the typical sense. It's not a place you can find on a map, and it's not a thing you can buy. Enlightenment, or nirvana, is more of a profound realization, a state of inner peace, an understanding that comes when we transcend the endless cycle of craving, suffering, and attachment. At the heart of enlightenment is the complete cessation of suffering. It is not just the absence of physical pain, but the liberation from the mental and emotional turmoil that we often bring upon ourselves through attachment, desire, and ignorance. Think of it as a profound shift in perception, a change in how we see the world and ourselves. When we achieve enlightenment, we see life as it truly is, without the filters of our desires, fears, or preconceived notions. And in this clarity, we find peace. So, how does one achieve enlightenment? Well, it's not a quick fix. It's a gradual process of transformation, one step at a time. Through the cultivation of mindfulness, compassion, wisdom, and ethical behavior. It's about walking the path with patience, perseverance, and self-awareness. The Buddhist teachings show us that enlightenment isn't reserved for a select few. It's available to anyone who is willing to walk the path. One of the most profound aspects of enlightenment is that it is not about gaining something new. It is about realizing the truth of what already is. It is about seeing through the illusion of a permanent self and the idea that happiness comes from external sources. Enlightenment is the realization that happiness and peace are already within us, and that the only thing standing in the way is our attachment to the fleeting things of the world. But let's be clear, enlightenment doesn't mean you suddenly become perfect, or that all your problems disappear. Enlightenment is not an end to challenges or difficulties. Instead, it's a shift in how we respond to those challenges. The enlightened person still experiences pain, loss, and struggle. They're simply no longer attached to these experiences in the same way. They no longer react with fear, anger, or desire. Instead, they approach life with a sense of equanimity, accepting whatever comes with open awareness and peace. The Buddha himself reached enlightenment under the Bodhi tree after years of searching, meditating, and contemplating. He finally realized that the key to ending suffering wasn't through self-inflicted pain or asceticism, but through understanding the nature of suffering, impermanence, and non-attachment. This realization became the foundation for his teachings, and it is the essence of Buddhist practice to free ourselves from the cycle of craving and suffering and to find peace in the present moment. Now, you might be wondering how this applies to you. After all, achieving enlightenment sounds like a lofty goal, something reserved for monks or spiritual masters. But the truth is, enlightenment is available to all of us, no matter where we are on our journey. It doesn't require you to retreat from the world or meditate for hours on end. It simply requires you to cultivate mindfulness and awareness in your daily life. It's about making small changes in how you approach your thoughts, actions, and emotions. It is about recognizing the impermanent nature of everything around you and learning to release your attachment to outcomes. One of the key practices that help cultivate enlightenment is meditation. Meditation isn't just a tool for relaxation or stress reduction. It is a powerful way to train the mind. Through meditation, we learn to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment. We see them for what they are, fleeting, impermanent phenomena that come and go. This awareness helps us detach from the need to identify with our thoughts or feelings. When we can do this, we stop seeing ourselves as defined by our mental states, and we begin to experience the peace that comes from observing rather than reacting. But it's not just about sitting still in silence. The Buddha encouraged his followers to apply mindfulness in every aspect of life. Whether you're eating, walking, talking, or working, each moment is an opportunity to practice mindfulness and awareness. By bringing this kind of awareness to your daily activities, you begin to see life in a new light. You stop rushing through the day, waiting for something to happen, and instead, you begin to appreciate the beauty and wisdom that exists in every moment. And it's important to remember that enlightenment is not about escaping life's difficulties. In fact, enlightenment often involves facing our challenges head-on with a clear and calm mind. It's about seeing the impermanence of everything, so when hard times come, you don't resist them or fight against them. You simply accept them, knowing they, too, will pass. Enlightenment is not about avoiding pain. It's about transforming your relationship with it. It's about approaching life with a sense of peace, no matter what comes your way. Now, let's talk about the role of compassion in enlightenment. It's easy to think of enlightenment as an individual pursuit, a personal journey toward peace. But Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is not just about you, it's about the world around you. In fact, one of the hallmarks of true enlightenment is compassion. The more you awaken to the impermanent nature of life, the more you feel connected to all beings. You realize that we're all on this journey together, and your suffering is not separate from the suffering of others. Compassion is the natural byproduct of this realization. When we achieve a deeper understanding of life, we also develop greater empathy and love for others. Enlightened individuals don't just meditate for their own benefit, they use their awareness to help alleviate the suffering of others. They act with kindness, love, and compassion, recognizing that all beings are interconnected. This doesn't mean that they take on the suffering of others, but that they approach the world with a heart full of love and a willingness to help. At the end of the day, enlightenment isn't about achieving some abstract, far-off goal. It's about waking up to the reality of the present moment and experiencing life fully, with awareness, compassion, and peace. It's about recognizing that the world is impermanent, that our sense of self is an illusion, and that happiness and peace come not from external sources, but from within. The journey to enlightenment is long and winding, but every step on the path brings us closer to a life of freedom, compassion, and wisdom. And remember, enlightenment is not a final destination, it's a process, a continuous unfolding of awareness, compassion, and peace. Now that we've delved into the nature of enlightenment, let's shift our focus to another fundamental teaching in Buddhism: compassion. This one's big. In fact, compassion is not just an ancillary part of the Buddhist path. It's at the very heart of it. It's so important that it's woven into practically every aspect of Buddhist practice. And here's the kicker. Buddhism teaches that the path to enlightenment is not a solo mission. It's a shared journey, one that's deeply rooted in compassion for all sentient beings, including ourselves. In Buddhism, compassion, or karuna, is the ability to empathize with the suffering of others and to act in ways that alleviate that suffering. It's not just about feeling sympathy or pity. It's about recognizing the pain of others and responding with genuine care and action. Compassion is not limited to people who are easy to love. It extends to all beings, even those who challenge us or who we may not naturally feel affection for. That is the true test of compassion. Can you show love and kindness to those who hurt you, or to those who are difficult to understand? Let's take a moment to pause and reflect on the modern world. We live in a time where individualism is often celebrated, and self-interest can sometimes overshadow the needs of others. Compassion, in the sense, can sometimes feel like an afterthought or something we're supposed to practice, but rarely do. But in Buddhism, compassion is more than a nice sentiment. It's a practice. In fact, it's an essential component of spiritual development. Without compassion, the Buddhist teachings would lose much of their power. It's through compassion that we connect with others, that we reduce suffering, and that we experience a sense of true fulfillment. Now, don't mistake compassion for weakness. Some people might think of compassion as caring too much or being a pushover. But in Buddhism, compassion is incredibly powerful. It's a source of strength, because it arises from a deep understanding of suffering and the desire to alleviate it. Compassion helps us overcome the ego, which often keeps us trapped in cycles of self-centered thinking. When we practice compassion, we see beyond our own desires, fears, and prejudices. We start to realize that everyone is struggling in some way, and that the path to peace lies in supporting one another. Here's where things get interesting. Historians still debate the extent to which Buddhist compassion was influenced by earlier Indian traditions, such as Hinduism, or whether it emerged as a distinct, revolutionary practice. Some argue that the notion of compassion in Buddhism was shaped by the more universal idea of love, found in early Indian religious practices, while others suggest that the Buddha's emphasis on karuna was radically different. Regardless of the academic discussion, what's most important is the practical application of compassion in daily life and how it shapes our relationships with others. Let's talk about how compassion operates on a day-to-day level. It begins with mindfulness, the awareness of the suffering of others, and the recognition that we all experience pain in different forms. But mindfulness is only the first step. Compassion then calls us to act. It invites us to go beyond just noticing the pain of others and take some form of action to help. This doesn't always mean grand gestures. Often, it's the small, everyday acts of kindness that matter most. A kind word, a smile, a moment of listening to someone who needs to be heard. These are all forms of compassion. But compassion isn't just about offering help when it's convenient. It also requires a certain level of vulnerability. To practice true compassion, we have to open ourselves up to the suffering of others. We have to be willing to feel that pain, even if it makes us uncomfortable. That's where the real depth of compassion lies, and recognizing that we are all connected, and that to help others is to help ourselves. The more we give of ourselves in compassionate ways, the more we expand our own hearts and minds. And yet, compassion isn't just about others, it's also about ourselves. In Buddhism, there is a teaching that suggests you can truly show compassion to others if you are not also compassionate toward yourself. We often think that being compassionate means sacrificing our own needs or ignoring our own pain. But that's not what Buddhism teaches. To truly practice compassion, we need to start with self-compassion. This means acknowledging our own suffering, being kind to ourselves when we make mistakes, and treating ourselves with the same love and understanding that we extend to others. Self-compassion is vital because, without it, we run the risk of burnout, resentment, or even self-hatred. If we're constantly giving to others without caring for ourselves, we end up depleting our emotional reserves. That's why the Buddhist path stresses balance, both compassion for others and care for our own well-being. It's about understanding that you can only pour from a cup that's full. So, by practicing self-compassion, you not only help yourself, but you also make it possible to help others more effectively and with a true, genuine heart. But compassion is not always easy. There are times when we're confronted with people who challenge us, people we don't like, or situations that feel too overwhelming to address. Buddhism acknowledges this struggle and teaches us that practicing compassion in difficult moments is one of the most profound ways to grow spiritually. It's easy to be kind to those we love or those who are kind to us, but true compassion requires us to extend love and care even to those who have hurt us or whom we disagree with. One of the most powerful stories of compassion and Buddhist teachings is that of the Buddha himself. After achieving enlightenment, the Buddha didn't retreat into isolation. He could have, but instead, he chose to teach others despite the fact that many people misunderstood him, ridiculed him, or even opposed his teachings. Yet, he responded to all with compassion, offering wisdom and guidance to those who sought it. His life is a perfect example of how compassion can transform both ourselves and the world around us. As you walk through your own life, consider how you can bring more compassion into each moment. It might not always be easy, and you might stumble along the way, but every small act of kindness, every moment you offer understanding instead of judgment, brings you closer to the heart of the Buddhist path. Remember, compassion isn't about perfection, it's about progress. It's about creating a world where everyone, including ourselves, can find healing and peace, one small act at a time. So, as we continue this journey together, remember that compassion is not just something you practice when it is convenient. It is a way of life. It's about seeing others as fellow travelers on the same journey, recognizing their pain, and doing what you can to lighten their load. And in doing so, you'll find that the path to enlightenment is paved not just with wisdom, but with compassion. As we continue our journey through the teachings of Buddhism, let's explore how Buddhism intersects with modern life. You might be wondering, what's the relevance of ancient Buddhist teachings in today's fast-paced, tech-driven world? It's a valid question, especially considering the challenges we face today: anxiety, overwork, constant distraction. and a deep sense of disconnection. But here's the thing. The principles of Buddhism are timeless. They were formulated over 2,000 years ago, yet they have profound applications for our lives today, helping us navigate the modern world with more clarity, peace, and balance. One of the ways Buddhism can help us today is by addressing the overwhelming pace of modern life. We're constantly on the go, juggling work, social obligations, personal goals, and, in many cases, the pressure to maintain a certain image or status. We live in a world of instant gratification. Everything is available at our fingertips. And if it's not, we're often left feeling impatient, frustrated, or unsatisfied. This constant state of busyness and desire for more is exactly what Buddhism warns us about: attachment to fleeting things that provide only temporary satisfaction. At its core, Buddhism teaches us to slow down. It encourages us to practice mindfulness and to really be present in whatever we are doing. Whether you're eating, working, or having a conversation, mindfulness reminds us to fully experience each moment rather than rushing through life. The modern world often leads us to think we need to be constantly achieving, multitasking, or working harder. But Buddhism offers a different perspective. True happiness doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being more present. Take, for example, the practice of mindfulness meditation, which has gained popularity in the West in recent years. Mindfulness meditation is one of the easiest ways to practice being present, and it's something we can all incorporate into our daily lives. It's not about becoming a monk or retreating into silence for hours on end. It's about taking a few moments each day to stop, breathe, and become fully aware of the present moment. Studies have shown that mindfulness meditation can reduce stress, improve focus, and increase emotional well-being. It's a practice that helps us ground ourselves in the here and now, rather than being swept away by the constant demands of modern life. Buddhism also teaches us about the nature of desire which, when left unchecked, leads to suffering. In the modern world, we're constantly bombarded with advertising, social media, and consumer culture, all of which stoke our desires for more. We desire the latest gadgets, the perfect body, the ideal job, or the perfect relationship. And yet, even when we get these things, we often find ourselves wanting more. This never-ending cycle of craving and dissatisfaction is exactly what Buddhism warns against. The Buddha taught that the more we chase after these desires, the more suffering we create for ourselves. One of the most profound aspects of Buddhist teachings in the modern world is the focus on non-attachment. In a world that constantly tells us to pursue more, non-attachment encourages us to recognize that nothing in the external world will bring us lasting fulfillment. The latest technology, the dream job, or the perfect partner might bring us joy for a moment, but that joy is fleeting. True happiness, Buddhism teaches, comes from letting go of the attachment to external things and cultivating inner peace and contentment. By practicing non-attachment, we can break free from the constant chase for more and learn to appreciate what we have in the present moment. This doesn't mean that Buddhists advocate for renouncing all desires or giving up on our goals. It simply means that we should approach life's pursuits with a sense of detachment. We can still work toward our goals, enjoy our relationships, and appreciate material things, but we shouldn't cling to them as the source of our happiness. When we stop attaching our happiness to external things, we free ourselves from the constant cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. Now, you might be thinking, but what about ambition? What about success? The Buddha wasn't anti-ambition. In fact, he encouraged right effort and action, part of the Eightfold Path, which teaches us to work mindfully and with intention. But he also warned that we should not let our ambitions consume us. The Buddhist path is about finding balance, working hard toward our goals, but not letting those goals define who we are or dictate our happiness. In the context of our modern work culture, Buddhism offers a valuable lesson. Today, we often define ourselves by what we do and how much we achieve. The more we work, the more productive we feel, and the more we are praised for our accomplishments. But Buddhism teaches us that happiness isn't found in how much we do it as found in how we do it. This subtle shift in perspective is transformative. Instead of seeing work as a race to the finish line, Buddhism invites us to see it as an opportunity to practice mindfulness, compassion, and balance in every task we take on. The work itself becomes a tool for inner growth rather than a source of stress or competition. Social media is another area where Buddhism can offer insight. In today's world, we spend hours scrolling through endless streams of images, videos, and updates. Social media, for all its benefits, often exacerbates feelings of inadequacy, comparison, and anxiety. We see others living seemingly perfect lives, and it can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking we're somehow lacking. Buddhism teaches us to detach from these external validations and to instead cultivate a sense of inner worth that doesn't depend on approval from others. It encourages us to embrace the present moment, to be mindful of how we engage with technology, and to step away from the constant need to compare ourselves to others. The Buddhist teachings can also guide us through the modern challenges of mental health. Anxiety, depression, and stress are more prevalent than ever before, and many of us feel disconnected from ourselves and others. Buddhism's focus on mindfulness, compassion, and understanding the impermanence of all things offers a way to reduce these feelings. When we practice mindfulness, we learn to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment or attachment. This gives us the space to acknowledge our feelings, but not to be controlled by them. Buddhism teaches us that we are not our thoughts or emotions, we are the awareness that observes them. This awareness allows us to respond to life's challenges with a sense of calm, rather than reacting impulsively out of fear or stress. Buddhism's emphasis on interconnectedness is also profoundly relevant today. In a world where we're often told to compete against one another, Buddhism reminds us that we are all interconnected. Our actions, thoughts, and behaviors affect the world around us. This understanding can lead to greater empathy, compassion, and cooperation, rather than competition. It teaches us that the well-being of others is tied to our own, and that by helping others, we help ourselves. In conclusion, the teachings of Buddhism are as relevant today as they were over 2,000 years ago. They offer profound insight into how we can navigate the complexities of modern life with more peace, balance, and understanding. By practicing mindfulness, non-attachment, and compassion, we can reduce suffering in our lives and live more fully in the present moment. And perhaps most importantly, we can embrace the journey, not as a race to the finish line, but as a path of growth, connection, and inner peace. As we continue our exploration of Buddhist teachings, let's reflect on the deeper impact these ancient practices can have on modern society. It's easy to think of Buddhism as a personal journey toward peace and enlightenment, and it certainly is that. But Buddhism also provides profound insights into how we engage with and contribute to the larger world around us. This perspective, one that emphasizes interdependence, compassion, and mindfulness, can be transformative not only for the individual, but for society as a whole. Let's start by considering interconnectedness, one of the central tenets of Buddhism. Buddhism teaches that all beings are interconnected and that our actions have a ripple effect throughout the world. This concept is rooted in the idea that nothing exists in isolation. Every action, thought, and decision we make has an impact on others. When we hurt someone, we're not just harming them, we're also harming ourselves, because we all share the same web of existence. Conversely, when we act with kindness and compassion, we're contributing to the collective well-being of the world. In today's world, where division and individualism often dominate, Buddhism offers a much-needed reminder that we are all part of the same human family. Our actions, no matter how small, matter. They have the power to create positive change or perpetuate suffering. This perspective encourages us to think beyond ourselves, to recognize that the welfare of others is intrinsically tied to our own. Whether we're interacting with our family, our colleagues, or even strangers, our behavior ripples out and affects the collective consciousness. Take a moment to think about the current state of the world. it's hard not to notice the growing divisions, inequality, and environmental degradation. Many people feel disconnected not just from each other, but from the planet itself. Buddhism teaches that this disconnection arises from a failure to recognize our interdependence. When we see ourselves as separate from others or from nature, it's easy to exploit, harm, or neglect. But when we understand that we are all connected, our actions change. We begin to act with more compassion and care for the world around us. Whether that's through acts of kindness, environmental stewardship, or standing up for justice. The teaching of compassion in Buddhism is also crucial in this context. Compassion isn't just a personal virtue. It's a social and collective force. In today's fast-paced, self-interested world, it's easy to become numb to the suffering of others. We scroll past headlines of tragedy or injustice, not fully connecting with the pain of those affected. But Buddhism asks us to break out of this emotional numbness. It asks us to feel the pain of others and respond with compassion. And here's the thing, compassion isn't just about feeling sorry for others. It is about taking action to alleviate that suffering, however we can. Compassionate action is what transforms society. When we are able to see the suffering of others, whether it is in our own communities or on the other side of the world, and we respond with a genuine desire to help, we create a more empathetic world. Buddhism reminds us that compassion is not a finite resource. It doesn't run out. The more we give, the more we receive. And this isn't just a spiritual truth, it's a practical one. When we approach the world with a compassionate heart, we begin to foster connection and understanding rather than division and alienation. Think about the role of mindfulness in our modern world. With the constant stream of information, news, and distractions that fill our days, it's easy to lose track of what really matters. We rush from one task to the next, never pausing to truly reflect on our actions, our relationships, or our impact on the world. Mindfulness, however, offers a way to slow down and pay attention. It encourages us to engage with life fully, to be present in each moment, and to act with intention. When we live mindfully, we make more conscious choices. We stop reacting out of habit or frustration and instead respond with awareness and clarity. This can have a profound impact on our relationships with others. We become better listeners, more empathetic, and more patient. We stop rushing through life and we begin to savor the moments, finding beauty and meaning in even the simplest experiences. In a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming, mindfulness offers a way to center ourselves, to slow down, and to find peace amidst the noise. But mindfulness isn't just about personal peace, it also has the potential to transform the world around us. Imagine if more people took the time to be present, to listen deeply, and to act with intention. The ripple effect of mindful actions could create a world where people are more understanding, more patient, and more compassionate. Mindfulness can become a collective force for good, one that encourages kindness, empathy, and cooperation. Buddhism also teaches the importance of ethical living. The 5 precepts of Buddhism, which guide ethical conduct, are simple but profound. Refrain from killing, stealing, lying, engaging in sexual misconduct, and consuming intoxicants. These principles don't just benefit the individual, they help to create a harmonious society. When we follow these ethical guidelines, we reduce harm to ourselves, others, and the planet. We create an environment where people feel safe, respected, and valued. In today's world, we face numerous ethical challenges, from environmental destruction to human rights abuses to economic inequality. Buddhism teaches that the path to a better world starts with individual ethical conduct. Each one of us has a responsibility to live in a way that reduces harm and promotes the well-being of all. By embracing ethical living, we contribute to the collective shift toward a more compassionate, just, and sustainable world. Finally, one of the most powerful contributions Buddhism can make to modern society is its ability to cultivate inner peace. In a world that often feels chaotic, tumultuous, and divided, inner peace is a rare and precious commodity. But Buddhism teaches that peace is not something we find externally. It's something we cultivate within ourselves. When we have peace inside, we are less likely to react to external circumstances with fear, anger, or frustration. We become more resilient, more compassionate, and more capable of contributing to positive change. Inner peace, however, is not a passive state, it's an active practice. It requires discipline, mindfulness, and awareness. It means acknowledging the challenges and suffering in the world, but choosing not to be overwhelmed by them. It means acting from a place of calm, rather than fear or reactivity. And when we cultivate inner peace, we become beacons of calm and compassion for others. We can inspire others to find peace in their own lives, creating a ripple effect that spreads far beyond ourselves. In conclusion, Buddhism offers a powerful framework for engaging with modern society. Its teachings on interconnectedness, compassion, mindfulness, ethical living, and inner peace have the potential to transform not only individuals but also the world around us. As we move through our busy, distracted lives, we can draw upon these ancient teachings to navigate the challenges of the modern world with greater clarity, compassion, and wisdom. The path to a better world starts with each of us, and with the wisdom of Buddhism, we can walk the path with purpose and peace. As we come to the final section of our journey through Buddhist teachings, it's time to reflect on how we can embrace the journey itself. We've discussed the core aspects of Buddhism: enlightenment, compassion, mindfulness, the middle way, and the nature of the self. Each of these teachings offers profound insight into how we can live more fully and peacefully. But perhaps the most important lesson Buddhism teaches us is to embrace life as a journey, not a destination. In the modern world, we are often conditioned to think in terms of goals, outcomes, and achievements. We race toward the next milestone, the next promotion, the next big thing, believing that happiness and fulfillment lie just beyond our reach. But Buddhism asks us to pause and reflect. What if the journey itself is the goal? What if the pursuit of happiness, success, and fulfillment doesn't lie in the destination, but in how we engage with life along the way? Buddhism teaches that life is impermanent, and that everything, including our thoughts, emotions, and experiences, is constantly changing. We spend so much of our time focused on what we want to achieve or obtain. But the truth is, we cannot control the future. The only thing we have control over is how we approach each moment. By practicing mindfulness and awareness, we can start to live more fully in the present. We can let go of the obsessive desire to reach a final destination and instead find contentment in the journey itself. Think about the simple act of walking through a beautiful park. If you're focused on reaching the end of the path, you might miss the birds singing in the trees, the flowers blooming at your feet, and the peaceful rustle of the leaves in the wind. But if you slow down and truly experience each step, the journey becomes its own reward. Every step is a new moment of discovery, a chance to appreciate the beauty and wonder that surrounds you in life. Just as in walking through a park, the journey is where the magic lies. Every interaction, every challenge, every moment of joy and pain offers an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to connect with others. When we let go of the need to control the outcome, we open ourselves up to the full richness of life. We begin to appreciate the small, everyday moments that often go unnoticed. We find meaning in the process, not just in the result. But embracing the journey also requires a shift in mindset. Buddhism teaches us to let go of attachment to the outcome. This doesn't mean we stop striving for goals or pursuing our passions. It simply means that we stop tying our happiness and self-worth to those achievements. When we detach from the need for external validation, we can experience life with greater freedom and peace. We can enjoy the process of creation, growth, and self-discovery without constantly worrying about where it will take us. In the same vein, Buddhism teaches us to approach life with non-attachment. This doesn't mean detaching ourselves from life or relationships. Rather, it means not allowing our sense of self to be defined by what we possess, what we achieve, or how others perceive us. Non-attachment frees us from the cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. It helps us see that our value isn't tied to any external circumstance, it comes from within. So, as we reflect on how to embrace the journey, it's important to remember that it's not about avoiding suffering, hardship, or pain. Life's challenges are an inevitable part of the path. Buddhism teaches us that suffering is a natural part of life, but it's how we respond to suffering that makes all the difference. Instead of resisting or fearing the difficult moments, Buddhism encourages us to face them with mindfulness and compassion. These moments are opportunities for growth, for deepening our understanding, and for cultivating wisdom. The journey we're on isn't always linear, and it doesn't always follow a predictable path. Some days will be full of joy, others will be filled with difficulty. But when we approach each moment with an open heart, we start to see that the journey itself is the point. The people we meet, the lessons we learn, and the experiences we have along the way are all part of the larger tapestry of life. And in this tapestry, each thread is essential, whether it's woven with joy or sorrow. As we close our journey together, take a moment to reflect on how you can embrace the journey of life in your own way. Let go of the pressure to reach a specific destination. Let go of the fear that you're not achieving enough or moving fast enough. Instead, allow yourself to slow down and savor each moment. Cultivate mindfulness in your daily life. Be compassionate toward yourself and others. And above all, remember that the path itself is a treasure, not something to be rushed through. In Buddhism, the journey is never truly over. Each moment is an opportunity for new insight, new growth, and new connections. We are constantly evolving, learning, and expanding. And as you move forward in your own life, keep in mind that the ultimate goal isn't some far-off destination, it is the awareness and wisdom you cultivate along the way. The teachings of Buddhism offer us a map for navigating this journey. They help us find peace in the present moment, joy in the process, and love for all beings. Whether or not we achieve the state of perfect enlightenment in this lifetime doesn't matter. What matters is how we live each day, how we embrace the journey and live it fully. As the Buddha said, the path is the goal. Every step you take is part of your path. And as you walk it with mindfulness, compassion, and awareness, you'll find that the journey itself is the destination. As we reach the end of this journey together, I want to leave you with a simple thought. Life is a path, not a destination. Each moment is an opportunity to practice mindfulness, compassion, and acceptance. The Buddhist teachings we've explored aren't just ancient concepts, they are timeless truths that can help us navigate our daily lives with greater peace, understanding, and connection. In this fast-paced world, it's easy to forget the beauty of simply being, of slowing down and appreciating the present. But as you move forward, remember that every step, every breath, and every interaction is part of your journey. There is no need to rush, no finish line to cross. The beauty lies in how you walk the path with awareness, kindness, and an open heart. So, take a deep breath, let go of the weight of the world, and allow yourself to be present. Your journey is yours alone, and it is beautiful in its imperfection. Keep walking it with compassion, curiosity, and an understanding that the path itself is where you'll find the peace you seek. Now, with all of this wisdom in mind, may you step into the world with a lighter heart and a clearer mind, ready to embrace the journey ahead. Sweet dreams, and may your path be filled with peace.